The Grammys just introduced a new award, Best Asian Pop Music Performance. The Grammys basically just built a new wall for Asian artists. The Grammys did not open the door for Asian artists. They built a separate entrance. The Grammys waited until Asian artists became impossible to ignore before giving them a separate category. How generous. BTS filled stadiums, Blackpink became a global touring powerhouse, and Rosé entered the main Grammy categories with APT. Asian artists topped charts, dominated streaming platforms, boosted award show ratings, and spent years proving they could compete with the biggest names in pop. And the Grammys' response was basically, congratulations, we found a different room for you. Best Asian Pop Music Performance is being sold as progress, more visibility, more nominees, more representation, and yes, potentially more trophies. But let us not throw a diversity parade just yet. Asian artists were not asking whether they were good enough to compete globally. They had already answered that question repeatedly. The industry simply kept moving the goalpost until ignoring them became more embarrassing than acknowledging them. So now the Grammys can recognize Asian language music without necessarily treating it as equal competition in the categories that carry the most prestige. Very convenient. The issue is not that Asian artists have their own award. The issue is that the category arrived after they had already broken into the mainstream. Did the Grammys create a platform for Asian artists? Or did they create a cultural waiting room where voters can place Asian music, praise themselves for being inclusive, and continue treating Western pop as the default? Because sometimes a new door represents access, and sometimes it is just a prettier way of telling you not to use the main entrance. The category is not automatically the villain. To be fair, the new category does not officially ban Asian artists from Record of the Year, Song of the Year, Album of the Year, or the existing pop categories. Asian artists can still compete elsewhere. English language songs can still be submitted to the established pop field. So, no, the Recording Academy did not publish a rule saying, Asian artists, please remain in your designated section. They are more subtle than that. The concern is not what the rules forbid, the concern is what the category encourages. Once Grammy voters see a category specifically labeled Asian pop, will they continue viewing Asian language songs as serious contenders in the broader fields? Or will they think that music already has somewhere to go? That is how institutional bias usually works. It does not always arrive as an obvious ban. Sometimes it arrives as a helpful little category that makes exclusion look organized. The Grammys do not need to remove Asian artists from the main categories. They only need to give voters a reason to stop imagining them there. And honestly, voters already have a strong relationship with convenience. Asian artists had already passed the test. The Western music industry has spent years making Asian artists complete an endless series of unofficial entrance exams. Can they chart in America? Can they sell albums internationally? Can they perform on Western television? Can they collaborate with an American artist? Can they speak enough English in interviews to make everyone comfortable? Can they sell out stadiums? Can they trend globally? Can they generate enough streams? Can they prove their fandom is not just loud online? Asian artists did all of that. Then they did it again because apparently the first 100 achievements were considered a trial period. BTS became one of the biggest acts in the world while still being treated like every new success was another audition. Blackpink built a global career so visible that even Western media eventually had to stop pretending it was merely fandom hype. Rosé showed that an Asian artist could enter the central pop conversation without waiting for an award category defined by geography. So, when exactly does the audition end? Apparently, never. Asian artists can dominate worldwide charts, headline global festivals, and sell out stadiums across continents. Yet the industry still finds ways to describe their success as regional. Meanwhile, an American artist can have one viral song outside the United States, and suddenly we are discussing their global impact. The standards are doing gymnastics. Western artists are treated as universal by default. Asian artists have to prove universality repeatedly. And even after proving it, their identity is still used to place them in a separate box. So, no, this category did not appear because Asian artists were invisible. It appeared because they became too visible to ignore. And instead of fully integrating them into the main Grammy conversation, the Academy created a more manageable place to contain the attention. Nothing says inclusion like a clearly labeled storage compartment. Asia is not a genre. There is also something incredibly lazy about treating Asian pop like one coherent musical genre. Asia is a continent, not a Spotify playlist. K-pop, J-pop, C-pop, P-pop, T-pop, Indonesian pop, Indian pop, and other Asian music industries have different languages, histories, production systems, audiences, and artistic traditions. Even K-pop itself is not one genre. A single K-pop album can move from R&B to hip hop, rock, dance pop, electronic music, ballads, and experimental production without asking permission. So, what exactly unites every artist in this category? not necessarily sound, not necessarily style, mostly geography and language. Imagine combining American, British, French, German, Spanish, and Italian pop into one category called Best Western Pop Music Performance. People would immediately ask why several distinct industries were being flattened into one vague cultural label. But when the same logic is applied to Asian music, suddenly we are supposed to call it nuanced representation. Apparently, cultural complexity becomes optional once the Grammy ballot gets crowded. The category could help overlooked artists, and that matters. But its structure also exposes how Western institutions often view Asia: massive, diverse, commercially valuable, and still convenient to group together when detailed understanding would require effort. This debate becomes much more uncomfortable when BTS enters the conversation. BTS spent years trying to be recognized as pop artists within the existing Grammy system. They were not asking for a Korean category. They were not campaigning to be treated as a charming international exception. They competed against major Western artists because their commercial impact, cultural reach, and musical success justified it, and the Grammys were thrilled to use them. BTS appeared in promotional material. They performed at the ceremony. Their reactions were filmed. Their attendance generated headlines. Army delivered viewers, engagement, social media attention, and global relevance to an award show that desperately enjoys pretending it does not need any of those things. The Grammys loved the traffic. The trophy was apparently where the relationship became complicated. The Academy was happy to present BTS as proof that the Grammys were global. It was much less comfortable proving that claim through an actual win. So when fans look at this new category, they are not being irrational or overly dramatic. They remember how BTS were welcomed as performers, presenters, promotional assets, and reaction camera content while repeatedly being denied the institutional recognition that mattered most. Did BTS break barriers just for the Grammys to build a more decorative one? Because that is what fans are worried about. Future Asian artists may not even be pushed toward the established categories with the same urgency. Why would Grammy voters confront their own biases when the ballot now offers an easier solution? They can simply say Asian music is represented. Represented where? That is the detail doing all the work. Imagine an Asian language song becoming one of the biggest records of the year. It dominates streaming platforms, it reaches audiences across continents, it influences fashion, choreography, production trends, social media, and pop culture. It is clearly functioning as a global record. Will Grammy voters seriously consider it for Record of the Year? Or will they park it in Best Asian Pop Music Performance and congratulate themselves for noticing it? That is the danger. The category could become a cultural parking lot, a place where globally successful Asian language music is stored so it does not disturb the main competition. And nobody needs to write that rule down. Voters only need to continue following their existing habits. The Grammys have never exactly been famous for adventurous voting. Familiar names, familiar campaigns, familiar sounds, familiar industry relationships, those things matter. Now voters have an even easier excuse not to engage deeply with Asian language releases. Why ask whether a Korean, Japanese, Mandarin, Thai, Filipino, or Indonesian song deserves a major nomination when there is already a category with Asian in the title? That is how an extra opportunity becomes an invisible ceiling, not through an official restriction, through laziness dressed as structure. Language reveals the double standard. The language requirement makes the whole situation even more revealing. An Asian artist releasing an English language song can compete in the established pop categories. But when that same artist performs in an Asian language, the song becomes more likely to be viewed as specialized. So, what exactly makes the artist mainstream? The quality of the song, its global impact, or their willingness to sing in English? Because if English is the escape route from being categorized as regional, then this is not only about music, it is about cultural comfort. Global audiences have already shown that language is not an automatic barrier. Fans stream songs they do not fully understand. They learn lyrics phonetically. They buy albums, attend concerts, and connect emotionally without demanding an English translation before every chorus. The audience adapted years ago. Award institutions are still behaving like Korean lyrics require a separate filing cabinet. An English language American song can travel around the world and remain simply pop. A Korean language song can travel around the world and still be treated as Korean first and pop second. That is not a reflection of its reach. It is a reflection of who the industry considers culturally neutral. The benefits are real, but so is the risk. There are legitimate benefits to this category. It could give recognition to artists who do not have BTS level fame, Blackpink level infrastructure, or a major Western collaboration. It could create visibility for J pop, C pop, P pop, Thai pop, Indonesian pop, and other markets that receive little attention from American award institutions. It could reward Asian language music without forcing artists to release an English crossover single first. Those are meaningful possibilities. Not every Asian artist should need a Bruno Mars collaboration, a major American label push, or a fandom the size of a small country before Grammy voters remember Asia has music. But possible benefits do not guarantee equal treatment. A separate category can give one Asian artist a trophy, while leaving the broader hierarchy completely untouched. Recognition says, we acknowledge that your music exists. Inclusion says, your music can compete at the center. Asian artists deserve both, and the Grammys should not receive endless praise merely for recognizing a music market that has already generated massive tours, billions of streams, and obsessive global engagement. That is not generosity. That is the Academy arriving late and expecting applause for finally reading the group chat. Who will actually benefit? There is another question the Grammys will eventually have to answer. Will this category genuinely represent Asian pop, or will it mostly nominate whichever Asian artists are already visible in the United States? K-pop currently has stronger global distribution, larger international fandoms, greater Western media access, and closer relationships with American labels than many other Asian markets. So a category supposedly representing an entire continent could easily become dominated by the same Korean acts and companies already familiar to Grammy voters. The Academy could celebrate Asian diversity while nominating artists from the same handful of corporate pipelines. Meanwhile, artists from less internationally promoted markets could remain invisible inside the category supposedly created for them. That would be almost impressive. A diversity award that reproduces the exact access problem it claims to solve. Unless the voting body genuinely understands the industries involved, this category may become less about excellence across Asian pop and more about which Asian names American voters already recognize. That is not musical discovery. That is familiarity wearing a diversity badge. Fandoms are also playing the game. Fandoms are not completely innocent either. Fans will call the Grammys irrelevant, outdated, biased, and desperate for engagement. Then nomination season arrives, and suddenly everyone becomes a campaign strategist with spreadsheets. Western validation does not matter until their favorite artist has a chance to receive it. But honestly, the contradiction makes sense. A Grammy does not determine artistic quality. It does, however, affect prestige, headlines, career narratives, industry treatment, and how an artist's success is remembered. Fans care because institutions still carry power, even when those institutions are inconsistent. Still, fandom should not automatically celebrate every new category as progress simply because it creates another trophy their favorite might win. More awards do not always mean more equality. Sometimes a system offers marginalized artists a smaller prize so it does not have to share the largest ones. A seat somewhere inside the building is not automatically a seat at the main table. Best Asian pop music performance is not automatically a bad category, but it will become a bad category if the Grammys use it as the default destination for Asian language music. Its value will not be proven by a polished press release about diversity. It will be proven by what happens outside the category. Will Asian artists continue receiving serious consideration for Record of the Year, Song of the Year, Album of the Year, and the established pop awards? Will the nominees represent several Asian music markets or only the acts already popular in America? Will this category expand opportunity, or will it give voters permission to stop imagining Asian language music as mainstream? Those patterns will tell us everything. Asian artists deserve more than technical eligibility, more than a performance slot, more than reaction camera footage, more than a separate trophy designed to make the institution look globally aware. They deserve actual consideration in the categories that continue to define the center of the music industry. Best Asian pop music performance could become a genuine platform, but only if it elevates Asian artists without redirecting them away from the main stage. The real test is not who wins the new category. The real test is who still gets nominated outside it. Because if the Grammys recognize Asian artists only after placing them in a separate lane, they did not remove the barrier. They gave it better branding. And that's where I'm leaving it. Asian artists spent years proving they belonged in the main categories, and the Grammys responded by giving them a separate room. How progressive. If this category creates more opportunities, great. But if voters start treating it like the designated parking spot for Asian language music, then this is not inclusion. It is containment with better branding. Like, subscribe and tell me, did the Grammys create a platform or just a prettier barrier? Bye.